C'est la famille LARAC qui appelle une rencontre intéressante. Alors cette rencontre était pas des soins, mais depuis malheureusement 2 à 3 ans, elles sont devenues rares. Pour les autres, tout le monde connaît, une situation pédagogique très compliquée. Maintenant, on veut renouer, on veut retenir de LARAC. Donc, je suis heureux que les étudiants de Master 2 soient là. C'est important. Il faut prendre la relève. Le LARAC, c'est pour tout le monde. L'objectif est d'être, mettons, on organise l'animation scientifique. Mais aussi, son objectif, c'est d'aider les étudiants et les enseignants aussi à produire des articles scientifiques.
Je pense qu'il n'y a pas de protocole ici. Ici, je suis avec mes patrons du département d'anglais. Je vous félicite d'abord pour l'organisation de ces doctorats. Parce que les doctorales doivent constituer une tradition pour le niveau doctoral. Ce ne serait pas bien d'attendre toujours jusqu'à la fin du travail pour mettre l'étudiant devant un jury. Mais les doctorales permettent de préparer l'étudiant, de l'orienter et le dire. Un étudiant peut venir avec un thème et lors des doctorales, on l'aide à réajuster le thème. C'est important. C'est mieux que de laisser jusqu'après 2 ans de recherche, on vient, on nous dit, il faut réajuster le thème. Et pendant tout ce temps-là, en général, il est seul avec son directeur. Et pendant les doctorales, l'étudiant est avec d'autres enseignants. Il y a un regard extérieur. Le directeur n'est pas toujours en mesure de dire ou bien de voir tout ce que les autres peuvent voir. Donc, si vous avez ici le collectif, non, mais tous les collègues du parcours littérature, je suis convaincu que cela vous apportera énormément de choses parce que chacun va contribuer en fonction de son expérience, en fonction de sa culture littéraire, en fonction de sa compréhension du thème, etc. Il va vous apporter quelque chose. Et c'est important parce que le doctorat aujourd'hui ne se fera plus comme avant. Il y a des séminaires que vous allez faire. L'aide de l'école doctorale, c'est demain après-midi. Il y aura des séminaires à faire. Ensuite, ces séminaires-là seront notés, etc. Donc, vous préparez dès à présent, vous permet de gagner énormément de temps. Et c'est pourquoi il faut être actif dans votre laboratoire. Le laboratoire doit être l'endroit où l'étudiant se sent à l'aise. C'est vous qui devez animer les laboratoires, pas vos professeurs. C'est vous qui devez animer les laboratoires et ils doivent vous aider, ils doivent vous orienter. Et c'est pourquoi je pense qu'il faut aussi féliciter vos professeurs de leur générosité. Parce que ce ne sont pas tous les laboratoires qui organisent des doctorales à l'université. Mais cette organisation, sincèrement, vous permet de gagner énormément de temps parce qu'il y a des problèmes qui pourront être réglés en amont aujourd'hui. Au lieu d'attendre jusqu'à la fin, il y a beaucoup d'étudiants qui se découragent. Pourquoi? Parce que tout simplement, au bout de 2 ans, on leur a demandé de changer de thème. Ils sont complètement découragés. Si maintenant l'étudiant s'inscrit cette année, ou bien l'année dernière, il participe au doctorat de cette année, on lui dit non. Ce thème-là, il faut le réajuster, etc. Ça veut dire qu'on lui a rendu service parce qu'il a réglé un problème. Donc, vraiment, je sais que vous allez parler anglais, mais si c'était en français, je vous assure que je serais resté jusqu'à la fin parce que là où on parle de littérature, ça m'intéresse toujours, je vais y être. Et j'ai eu à participer, j'ai eu l'honneur, il m'a fait l'honneur de m'inviter à un jury de thèse, c'était la thèse de Mame Bounama, et c'était avec plaisir. Donc si moi, je pouvais participer, je serais là. J'ai une réunion tout à l'heure, je viens de finir une autre réunion à 15h, je commence une réunion à 15h, après j'ai une autre réunion à 16h, donc je ne pourrai pas être là jusqu'à la fin, mais je tenais au moins faire acte de présence et à vous remercier de m'avoir associé à votre activité et surtout féliciter votre laboratoire qui fait un excellent travail. C'est le laboratoire qui publie à travers Safara régulièrement et des publications de qualité. J'ai eu à évaluer des articles là-bas. On ne m'a jamais dit non, non, il faut regarder seulement après, on veut le publier. Non. Si je dis que ce n'est pas publiable, on l'envoie comme ça à l'auteur pour lui dire que ce n'est pas publiable. Donc c'est un laboratoire qui est en train de faire un travail sérieux. Et ça se voit aussi à travers les thèses qui sont soutenues dans votre département, etc. J'encourage tout le monde, je félicite tout le monde et je vais vous remettre la parole. Je pense que ça ne vaut pas la peine d'ouvrir. C'est vous qui ouvrez, c'est lui le grand patron, c'est mon grand frère, donc je vais le laisser ouvrir et après, voilà. Vraiment, merci beaucoup à tous. Et j'ai envie d'écouter les étudiants, mais il faut être sévère avec eux. Ah oui, il faut les mettre comme le jour de la soutenance. Allez, merci beaucoup à tous.
Merci, directeur.
Merci.
Non, moi je suis de...
On pense, c'est-à-dire que tous les documents, donc préparez-vous vraiment à une belle soutenance. Préparez-vous à écrire des articles scientifiques au niveau, comme eux le font, nos enseignants qui sont là. Parce qu'ils ont surtout un background théorique très solide. Et ce sont ces documents qui vous offrent l'occasion maintenant de vous intéresser à réalité. Donc voilà, donc ceci étant, on va donner la parole au directeur du laboratoire, pour Babacar, pour ouvrir de façon officielle la cérémonie.
Avec quelques mots. Bonjour, je souhaite la bienvenue à tout le monde, à toutes et à tous. Je suis particulièrement ravi de vous revoir parce qu'il y a eu vraiment un long temps d'hibernation dû à divers facteurs. Il y avait la pandémie d'abord. Ensuite, il y a eu les fermetures intempestives de l'université avec la situation politique prévue. Parce qu'on avait prévu de faire des doctoriales l'année passée. D'ailleurs, la date était calée. Tout ça. Donc vraiment, aujourd'hui, ça marque un retour à la normale. Quoique timide, hein, parce qu'on aurait pu peut-être faire mieux. Mais vraiment, je suis très content. Parce que je crois que le directeur l'a rappelé, et Maurice aussi l'a dit hein, de manière implicite, quand il parlait de la qualité des publications. Parce qu'en fait, le doctorat, c'est vraiment un défi énorme. Nous sommes passés par là, on sait. Et je sais qu'à part, peut-être à part, il y a quelqu'un même qui comparait le doctorat à la femme qui donne naissance. Tellement c'est fini. Tellement c'est fini. Tellement aussi, ça peut être décourageant, ça peut être frustrant. Parce que des fois, vous pouvez écrire même 200 pages, et on vous dit vraiment il faut tout revoir, réorganiser. Et c'est vraiment frustrant. Des fois, on en veut même à notre encadreur. On le déteste. Moi, en tout cas, il y a un étudiant qui me disait même plus bonjour. Je l'ai encadré en moins de... Au même ça, je vous jure, hein, il me disait même plus bonjour. Parce qu'il m'a amené un papier que j'ai lu. J'ai mis beaucoup de rouge. Donc après, lui certainement, il voulait soutenir rapidement et s'en aller. Quand je lui ai donné ça avec les remarques sur la méthodologie, on s'est croisés à 3 reprises, il ne peut pas ne pas m'avoir vu. Il ne m'a même pas dit bonjour, bon, mais j'ai laissé passer. Mais un jour, le professeur Dior est revenu d'Espagne et il m'a amené un calme. Il m'a dit, il y a un de tes étudiants que j'ai rencontré en Espagne qui m'a donné ça. Il m'a dit non, en tout cas, il n'a pas tari vélo. Il a vu les filles. Voilà, parce qu'en fait, il a pris un cours de méthodologie. Et toutes les remarques que je lui faisais, donc c'était des remarques vraiment justifiées. C'était en Espagne. Sur les MLA, les citations, tu vois. J'étais trop content. C'est pour dire qu'en fait, c'est frustrant. Mais le but qu'on cherche, c'est vraiment d'avoir un produit de bonne qualité. J'aime toujours à les rappeler parce que même l'autre jour, il y a un de mes étudiants qui m'a appelé pour me dire est-ce qu'on peut envisager une soutenance d'ici juin? Je lui dis non, je ne peux pas te garantir. Parce que d'abord, il faut que je dise et que je considère que c'est soutenable, que je fasse un rapport soutenable qui engage ma propre crédibilité en tant que chercheur. Et ensuite, la formation doctorale donc, va envoyer ce travail à des pré-rapporteurs, peut-être 3. Et il faut qu'on ait 2 pré-rapports favorables pour qu'on puisse parler de choses. Donc, je ne peux vraiment pas garantir. Parce qu'il faut que je sois satisfait du travail. Et en plus, même moi, je suis un peu tendu quand on envoie au pré-rapporteur. Parce que supposons on envoie au professeur Mendy qui dit que ce travail n'est pas soutenable. Donc c'est peine perdue. C'est pourquoi en fait des fois on est très très exigeant. Donc c'est pourquoi aussi ces doctoriales sont très importantes. Parce que non seulement vous aurez le feedback, le retour de votre encadreur, mais en plus en fait il y aura d'autres experts qui pourront même voir des choses. Parce que moi, des fois en lisant la thèse, je suis tellement là-dedans qu'il y a des choses qui m'échappent. Par contre, Mrs. ou Maman, par exemple, qui sont en dehors pour dire, mais tiens, pourquoi ne pas changer la chose? Donc c'est ça. Donc il est important qu'on les tienne chaque année. Chaque année, ou même peut-être autant que faire ça. Parce que je crois que ça serait bien si au niveau de chaque partie ou chapitre, vous pouvez avoir donc le retour. Et même dans le choix du sujet. Même dans le choix du sujet. Des fois, on se précipite, on dit je veux écrire sur telle ou telle chose. Mais il faut toujours faire en fait la revue littéraire. La revue littéraire est très très importante. Parce qu'il nous est arrivé à plusieurs reprises de perdre du temps. Un étudiant vous propose un sujet, a priori, le sujet il est bon. Mais dès que vous commencez à fouiller, vous vous rendez compte que ce sujet a été vraiment traité de fond en comble. Et c'est des choses qui arrivent des fois. Même moi, je l'ai dit en classe un jour, j'ai travaillé sur Martin. Souvent dans les romans naturalistes, le ton il est très sérieux. J'ai lu un roman naturaliste où il y avait le comique comme élément. Où est-ce que le comic relief? Alors là, j'étais tellement excité, j'ai rédigé un article de 16 pages que j'ai partagé. Parce que moi, toujours mes articles, je les partage avec Khadidiatou, avec Ousmane. Bounama, je crois que même à l'instant, ils me lisent et ils me font un feedback. Donc, l'article était potable, je l'envoie à un collègue qui est aux États-Unis. Mais il me dit, mais tiens, Babacar, est-ce que tu as lu un article, je n'oublierai jamais le nom, l'auteur il s'appelle James Carroll. James Carroll. Donc, il m'envoie l'article et je vois que James Carroll avait dit tout ce que je voulais dire. Parce qu'en fait, la revue n'a pas été exhaustive. Donc, j'ai dû même changer d'angle, comparer Matic à Émile Zola. Pour avoir un article, parce que je ne voulais pas faire tout le contenu. Donc c'est pour vous dire que c'est vraiment difficile. Et aujourd'hui, vous avez une opportunité unique. Opportunité unique parce qu'il y a des experts qui sont là, il y a vos camarades qui sont là aussi. Donc vous allez présenter votre travail, on va essayer de le peaufiner. Donc en vue de les rencontrer. Même les sujets, vos stades de sujets, n'hésitez pas à partager. Donc vraiment sans perdre de temps, je vais donc laisser la parole au directeur adjoint, que je remercie aussi pour l'organisation, parce que j'étais très très pressé du temps. Mais Maurice vraiment a conduit la part. Donc profitez vraiment de l'expertise de nos collègues ici présents. Merci.
Tu n'as pas ouvert, hein? Directeur, tu n'as pas ouvert, hein? Tu n'as pas ouvert, hein?
C'est pas la première fois. Chaque fois que je vais à un événement, même quand j'ouvrais pour le recteur,
tu voulais l'ouvrir.
Donc, je déclare les doctoriales.
Thank you. Professor Dom, I think we come here with Dr. Ba, who is the first to present. Begin.
Khardiata, je pense.
Khadidiatou, first après Awa. Dr. Khardiata BA. Excellent.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Director. Thank you very much, Mr. Vice Director, for organizing this, this event that will allow our master students and our PhD candidate students to, share with us the results of their work. Okay, for some that will be simply the proposal for the PhD, and for others like Mrs. Khardiata, who has defended a thesis last year.
Very interesting. Very
yeah,
brilliant.
very interesting. Rich in information. It was in macrophobia and macrophilia. Yes, I cannot forget because I was part of it. Yes, but today Mrs. Khardiata is going to discuss the issue of daddy issues, okay, the breeding from for weight and daddy issues, okay. And I have to remind you that we have in this first panel that I have the honor to chair. We have two presentations. One is the one I have just mentioned, and we'll have another one by Mrs. Awa SAKHO, that will be fictional and feminist writings by Awa and Maurice. And then the last
Alpha
the
Oumar.
second of the first panel will be by Oumar, a child's soul experience in post-civil war trauma in some books by Ismail and So, this is Khardiata. You're ready to start. I think you have 15 minutes. Okay? 15 minutes. Yeah. And after the end of the presentation, you have the decision.
Yes.
Okay.
Choose the breeding ground for rape, incest, rape and incest in Djidiack. So in my PhD thesis, I worked on Gwendolyn, but as I'm a comparatist, I use her novels with other novels. But today I'm not a comparatist, today I'm an Africanist. So the issue of the daddy issue is the urban way of calling Electra syndrome. The Electra is the female version of the Oedipus complex. So in general, people think of childhood as the most carefree, least troubled time of life. Yet the eponymous main character in this novel, which she imagined as Gwendolyn, without any hesitation, she would say that her childhood was very difficult. The quality of one's childhood impacts one's adult life, one's teenage years, in terms of mental health, in terms of how one sees the world. The relationship between children and their parents has often been central for thinkers like psychologists and psychoanalysts. And as you know, she's not only a writer, but she's a sociologist. So she has, in some way, pondered over this issue too in this novel. The impact of Gwendolyn's relationship with her parents, her mother and her father. But here, this is an article I've written in which I only ponder over the relationship between the male figures in her life, i.e. her father, and the one who used to be a father figure for her uncle Johnny. So they both of them molested her at a young age. So I've divided it into two parts. The first one, I've entitled it A Predator in Sheep Clothes, The Art of Gaslighting. So gaslighting is what Uncle Johnny used on Gwendolyn after raping her so that she won't have in her the ability to go and talk to people about what happened to her. But before that, I can give you just a gist of what that issue is before going back to that. So people who are afflicted with this condition, that issue, they simply yearn for a man to step in and fulfill an unquenched fantasy role. They see the father as being a kind of hero, a supernatural being, somebody who would alleviate all the troubles they have in their life. So in a very interesting article written about put this novel in the heart of the country, there are two researchers who wrote about that issue and defined it as such. In popular media, the female Oedipus complex is often called as daddy issues. It refers broadly to the results of a female's turbulent or abusive relationship with her father, or absence of a father figure during her childhood, and the way in which this problem is said to hinder relationships later in life. As a matter of fact, often people who suffer from daddy issues look for a father figure in the relationships they have with people, be it at work, in school, or other areas of their life. Gwendolyn is not free from this. Her parents are migrants. They went to England and they left her there with to the care of her grandmother in Granville. Granville, if I'm not mistaken, I think it is in Jamaica. So Gwendolyn, she didn't have a father figure, and there was Uncle Johnny who used to come a lot to her house. And Uncle Johnny is a friend of her grandmother, Granny Naomi. So Gwendolyn liked Uncle Johnny because he was the only one who would pay attention to her. And this has happened even before her parents went abroad. Because when their parents were in their home country, they were always bickering with the grandmother, because the grandmother, she didn't really like Gwendolyn's mother's husband, i.e. Gwendolyn's father. So they were always bickering, fighting. And in that chaos, Uncle Johnny was the only one who really cared about her, in between brackets. He did that for a specific reason that I'm going to explain. So he would take her in her lap, on his laps. He would talk to her and act as a father figure to her. But this was an insidious way of gaslighting her. That's what I was explaining earlier. Gaslighting. So to define gaslighting, it's gradually manipulating someone in such a way to make them doubt their own certainty. The person does something to you. Normally you should be sure that this person is doing this to you, but you start to doubt your own certainty about the situation. So that's what Uncle Johnny did to her. He was so kind with her and everything. So Gwendolyn was like, no, this person cannot do anything wrong to me. So when he raped her, it was a shock to her. At that moment, when he raped her, Gwendolyn froze. You know, psychoanalysts, they talked about these 3 steps. Freeze, fight, flight, and freeze. When you come across something that is traumatic, you either flee, or you fight back, or you freeze. And all these choices you are making, they are not hazardous. You take those choices because of something that happened in your childhood. I.e., if you had a seeker attachment to your parents, i.e. your parents were good to you, were nurturing to you, you are so well grounded that when something happens to you, you know how to react. But when you are not securely attached to your parents as a child, it is difficult for you when something happens to you to know how to act. And Gwendolyn, she froze because from her past, the fact that her mother was not there with her, her father was not there with her at the time she needed them most, she unconsciously learned that she cannot count on anyone to help her. So when Uncle Johnny came to molest her, she froze. She knew that she couldn't fight back. He is bigger than her, and he was drunk at the time he was doing that. And at the same time, her grandmother Naomi was in the same room, but she was like dead asleep because she also has drunk. And this is something Uncle Johnny did on purpose. He was the one who gave wine to the grandmother so that she wouldn't react. So, you know, in our society sometimes when we hear about rape, people say, why didn't she shout? She's lying. Why didn't she do this? Why didn't she do that? But sometimes people are so shocked that they cannot act, they cannot do anything. Okay. That they cannot do anything at all. So this was the case of Gwendolyn. After raping her, Uncle Johnny used gaslighting to make her not talk to Granny Naomi about it, although she later would talk about it. He came the very next morning after raping her, acting like nothing has happened. So from this rape, Gwendolyn was marked. It was a shock for her, and when she would sleep, she would pee on her bed, and she has past age of peeing in bed. But she did that because it was so traumatic to her. I mean, in insult to injury, her grandmother did not understand her. She would like shout at her and tell her, why are you peeing in bed? She would humiliate her. And when she told him that Uncle Johnny molested her, as the great manipulator that Uncle Johnny is, he made everybody believe that she is lying, even the grandmother. So from this situation, when Gwendolyn left Granville and went to England and lived with her father and her mother, at that time, with the condition that she has daddy issues, she thought, now I'm saved, I'm with my father, the all-powerful. She was so happy. The very day she met Winston, even though they had never been together for a long time, the very day she met him, she took his hand, she was like so affectionate with him. But Winston would later molest her. But this may be shocking to someone, but I think that Winston also is a victim in some sense, in the sense that fathers who molest their children, as research has pointed out, the article is entitled Psychodynamics of Father-Daughter Incest. They do that not because they are seeking the daughter, but they are seeking their own mother. Let me read this quotation for you. The father seeks to find in his daughter the young wife of his early years. Unconsciously, however, as a young man, he was looking for a mother substitute in the girl he was courting. He faced a paradox that in taking the daughter, the incestuous father is trying to return to the mother, not his wife, but his own mother. And from reading the story of Gwendolyn, you would see that Winston did not have a good relationship with his mother. He lacked that love, he wanted that affection from his mother, but his mother did not give it to him. He was very dark-skinned. In our communities, there is what we call colorism. People, even here in Senegal, sometimes if your husband or you are light-skinned and the other partner is dark-skinned, when your child is born, the first thing that the people do is like looking at the ears of the child, trying to see whether he will be light-skinned or not. So in the Caribbean, colorism is very prevalent, and because of that, Winston was marginalized in his family. And one would understand that when you see Gwendolyn, when she had problems with her grandmother, she went to flee to her father's side. But there, they rejected her. First, they are very rich, like most Creoles, people who are mixed race in those areas. Second, they did not like to say that they have anything to do with these dark-skinned people. So when Winston raped her, it was the second shock of her life. It was very traumatic. So I think, can I say? Yeah, it's okay. Yeah. Let me see. It is an article. I have finished writing the article, but I wanted to share it with you so that I will have the ideas and write it that we will send it.
Thank you very much.
Okay, this is Awa SAKHO, is a PhD student. She registered for and today she is sharing with us the proposal from her thesis, and the title is Fictional and Feminist Writing by Awa and Bounama, Examples of 2000 Seasons, Osiris Rising, and Paradise, and God After the Skies. So this is Awa, this was your slide.
Thank you so much, and thank you everyone for giving us the opportunity to share with you the research proposal we have submitted, and which is about, which is entitled, as Dr. Mame said, The Fictional and Feminist Writings by Awa and Toni Morrison. The examples of 2000 Seasons, Osiris Rising, Paradise, and God Help the Child. So you would guess that it is a comparative study we want to do here, and of these two others, and about the cited works. So it is indeed an investigation, or let's just say an analysis through a feminist lens of for female empowerment of this novel. So it would have been easier, someone told me, if I had chosen 2 female or 2 male writers, but we thought that it would be more interesting to have 2 different perspectives of that of a male compared to that of a female. So hence the choice of this topic. So from the 18th to the 21st century, literature is studied with speculative works of fiction and theory and also criticism that all revolve around one thing: feminism. So feminism is in general defined as a social, political, and also a cultural movement that aims to achieve gender equality and eliminate gender-based oppression and discrimination. It also involves advocating for the rights of women, promoting the full participation and empowerment of women in all areas of the society. So the aim of this research is to analyze the representation of women in literature and promote perception of women in Africa and African American society. Obviously, we have 2 different societies here because, as you know, Awa is an African, and more particularly a Ghanaian. And Toni Morrison is an African American. So the realities of the 2 groups, of the 2 societies, are dissimilar due to the cultural and racial differences, although they both belong to the same period, the same 20th century. And also some of the themes and the technique of their writing, they have similarities in it, and also differences and so on. So note that Black African feminism is different from Western feminism, and because in Africa, Western feminism has remained questionable, and it is even perceived as incompatible with the African values. In fact, it has been seen as understood as being anti-man, and therefore against all values like marriage, childbearing, and also the conception of the family. And African feminism is concerned with the realities of the challenges that African women face in their daily lives. But note that feminism in Africa is, I can say, very poorly understood, because people presume that the fight is for the equality of women with men, while it seeks the inclusion of women in nation building and also societal participation. This is what Awa advocates in his novel 2000 Seasons and Osiris Rising, where we can see how he represents very strong and independent women. While in Western feminism has failed to address significant issues of race, class, and gender, which affect Black African women in America. That's why influential writers like Toni Morrison produce narratives that are centered on the concern of Black women and give a reader a look at the experiences of those women. So to analyze how Awa and Morrison represent and how they struggle for the empowerment of women in their novels. We would like to base our research on relevant theories like Black feminism, radical feminism, and post-colonial feminism that will help us understand, well, both Alma and Morrison's ideology of feminism. So for now, we have our professional outline, which is divided into 3 parts, so 3 points. Our first point will be a literature review with an overview of all 4 novels, and then a review of related literature on feminism, African feminism, Black feminism, and patriarchy also. On our second point, we will deal on the treatment of feminism in 2000 seasons, at 4 novels, 2000 seasons, Society's Rising, Paradise, and God and the Child, by doing an analysis of the portrayal of feminism in each of the 4 novels, and an identification of common themes and differences in the treatment of feminism. Our third and last part will be a comparative study of the author's novels by examining the form in the treatment of feminism and discussing the author's style, their theme, and also the perspective of feminism. Because Awa and Toni Morrison, they may belong to the same age, but their writing styles are different. They may have some similarities because Awa is more on the details, but his language is not very much dramatic compared to that of Toni Morrison. Yes, because Toni Morrison has a cold-blooded style of writing. Because when you read her novel Paradise, you will see that the first line of the novel starts with first they shoot the white girl, which is very cold-blooded, and it's a very vivid vocabulary. So and also they have similarities and differences on their themes, because Awa would focus more on equality and togetherness, while Toni Morrison would focus on show victimization, abuse, isolation, and cruelty. So we would do more researches on that, document ourselves on it, and see what we can propose. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. Listen to Mr. Alpha Oumar. As you have noticed, the first 2 presentations were on on female issues. This presentation is not on female issues, but still on abuse, the issue of abuse, more particularly child abuse. Okay? And the title of this presentation is Child Soldier Experience and Post-Civil Trauma. In some books by Ismail Ba, Emmanuel Jal, etc. So, and he also is presenting his proposal for the future.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Oumar. I'm here to introduce you my topic, my proposal. The topic is entitled Child Soldier Experience and Post-Civil Trauma in some books by Ismail Ba, Emmanuel Jal, and Architecture, Zedima Iwala, Ahmad Oumar, and Miromide de Soida. It's a topic where we have, writers. So, before taking this topic, I was thinking about Africa after independences. Why, the other continents were moving, so Africa, their political situation, is staying. So I say to myself, how to make decision on that. So why in Africa, we are not moving. So I found after independences, in many African countries, they face civil war after independence. And after that, I say, talking about both the problems of Africa, it will be so much. So I say, when I make my research, I found writers like Ismail Ba participating in civil war. So why children are participating in civil war? And Ismail Ba, when making research, he wrote a book named A Long Way Gone, where he mentioned, all the troubles, that he encountered when he was a boy soldier. He is from Sierra Leone. So when the civil war happening in Sierra Leone, they were recruited as child soldiers, but he got the chance, to be taken to the United States of America. Once over there, he wrote this book, A Long Way Gone, on long chemin parcouru, where he talked a lot about Africa and the civil war. So in this topic, we will be mostly interested in the child soldiers. Their definitions. Even the definition given to what is child soldier, it is given by the Cape Town principle. A child soldier is any person under 8 years of age who is part of any kind of regular or irregular armed force in any capacity, including but not limited to porters, messengers, and those accompanying such group other than purely as family members, girls recruited for sexual purpose, and false marriage are included in this definition. It does not therefore only refer to child who is carried or has carried arms. This definition is given by the Cape Town principle. But not only Ismail, but there are others. All the titles listed here, they are written by child soldiers. DIALLO, he is from Sudan. We all know that, even right now, the civil war is happening in Sudan. So in the 1918s, the second civil war this happened in Sudan. DIALLO, he participated in this civil war. And talking about civil war, so we first should know the causes of the civil war in many African countries. We all know that after independence, those who were given the power, they abused of the power. That's why many people were marginalized. And when these people are marginalized, so they started to fight. It was the case of in Sudan. And in Sudan, there was religious problems. So until now, the Muslims, when they were in power, they wanted to apply what we call the Sharia in Sudan, saying that the law of Sharia, they will be governed by the law of Sharia, and the others they refuse that. That's why they start to fight. So they say that now they will divide Sudan into two: the south and the north. When dividing Sudan into two, the south and the north, after they discovered oil in the south. Now the government was in the north, and the oil is discovered in the south. So the north say that the oil is not for them. So and the south say that this is for them. So they started to fight because of this oil. So we have many African writers, but the topics won't be only focused on Africa. We have another country which is called Sri Lanka, where Niromida Soiza is from. She is a young girl who participated in this bloodiest civil war, which lasted, I think, 25 years. Niromui Desoda, she wrote her memoir, which is my history as a child soldier, where she related all the causes of the Sri Lankan civil war. So why all those children, they participated in civil war? Some of them because of poverty. First, if their families are poor, and if they wanted to escape, from the civil war, they choose, to be taken as child soldiers just to escape or to survive. Some of them, there is the lack of education. So in a country where children are not educated, so when there is a civil war, it will be very easy to manipulate them, different from those who are at the school. So those children, they are manipulated. That's why they are recruited and participate to the civil war. So also there is what we call the forced recruitment. Forced recruitment. So when the rebel groups, they make children, the children, they have not the force to resist. They will take them by force. But once they are together, those children, they will be given drug, so as to kill people. And also we have socio-political and ethnic factors. So here children living in areas affected by civil war, ethnic conflicts, or political instability are at high risk of being recruited as child soldiers. These children may be targeted by armed groups due to their ethnicity, religious, or political beliefs. So we have also previous trauma. Children who have experienced previous trauma such as losing family members, displacement, and abuse are more susceptible to recruitment. They may see joining an armed group as a way to escape their traumatic past and find a sense of belonging. So all these children, why they wrote, those memoirs, just escape from trauma, because many of them were in rehabilitation centers. So just to be treated like others, and some of them were taken and like Ismail Abba, he was taken by UNICEF. When he was here, he was fighting. But once in the rehabilitation center, the UNICEF, when they come, he was the one who was relating, the history of the civil war that happened in Sierra Leone. And also we have China Kitesi from Uganda. She is also a young girl who participated in the civil war that happened in Uganda. So China's story of her life as a child soldier conscript in the Ugandan National Resistance Army starts at the age of 8 and continues for 10 years of terror, humiliation, and sexual assault. After rejoining the army years later, she serves as bodyguard to the minister for record, who is disgraced, and China is then captured by the Ugandan Secret Service and tortured for 6 months. It is a story from the horrors of Ugandan civil war, one of Africa's bloodiest and longest running conflicts, which has gone on for over 40 years, and where children are abducted and forced to commit atrocities regularly. China's story exposes the reality of their civil war and the terror committed and endured by children. It was Child Soldier. Child Soldier is the title of the memoirs of China. So for Allah is not obliged by Amadou Kurma. These are the 2 words of the boy's soldier Birama. In the final masterpiece, by one of Africa's most celebrated writers, Ahmad Nkrumah. When 10 years old, Birama's mother dies. He leaves his native village in the Ivory Coast, accompanied by the sorcerer and cook Yakuba, so search for his aunt Mame. Crossing the border into Liberia, they are sighted by rebels and forced into military service. Birama is given a class in Cove, minimal ration of food, a small supply of dough, and tiny wage, fighting in a chaotic civil war alongside many other boys. Birama sees death, torture, dismemberment, and madness, but somehow manages to retain his own sanity, raw and unforgettable, despairing, yet filled with laughter. Allah is not obliged to reveal the way in which children's innocence and youth are compromised by war. So, okay, for Peace of No Nation is a novel written by Uzodimma Iweala, an author who divides his time between America and Nigeria. The novel protagonist is Agu, a young boy who lives in an unnamed country with his father, his mother, and his sister. He has an idyllic childhood until the war comes to his village. His mother and sister are rescued by the United Nations, but the man stays behind to defend the village. After seeing his father being killed, Agu is forced to become a child soldier in rebel group like Ismail Ba. So for the history of the Sri Lankan Civil War, like Niromide Seza is a Sri Lankan author and human rights activist. She is best known for her memoir Tamil Tigress, which details her experience as a child soldier during the Sri Lanka Civil War. The book, which was first published in 2018, is a first-hand account of the life of a child soldier, the violence and trauma that they go through. In the book, the soldier described how she was forcibly conscripted into the liberation tigers of Tamil. So, the objective of the main objective of this study is also to explore the experience of child soldiers and their resilience in coping mechanism in the post-conflict period. Specifically, the study aims to understand the lived experience of child soldiers during and after the conflict, identify the factors that contribute to the resilience and coping mechanism of child soldiers in the post-conflict period, develop a recommendation for policymakers, practitioners, and researchers to improve the psychosocial well-being of child soldiers in the post-conflict. So, we are motivated by the fact that most African countries underwent civil war after gaining independence, and we notice repetitive coups d'etat leading to civil war because sometimes those who are in power monopolize the resources, leaving the population in poverty. We have chosen this topic not only because we are deeply interested in African culture and civilization, but also because we have judged it as motivational and important to know about the damage of civil war in Africa countries and the life of boy soldiers witness their passage. So at the end, we will make a comparison between Africa and other countries, because many of the writers, they think that civil wars happens only, not civil wars, but child soldiers are only recruited here in Africa. Only in Africa that children are recruited for fighting. So we will give the examples of Sri Lanka, which is not an African country. Sri Lanka is an Asian country, and civil wars happens there, and children were recruited. And also during the First World War and the Second World War, children were recruited in England and participate in the civil war that happens there, even in Pakistan. So we will take those texts here, those proposed from Africa and the others from Asia, like Miramide Seza, and the children who were recruited in Pakistan, and making a comparison between the Africans and the Asian writers and the Pakistan. Because there is an anthropologist from England. He wrote a very important book about child soldiers in the world. So saying that it's not only in Africa that children are recruited. So there are other countries where we can find, child soldiers. So, and sharing their experience. All these children, they were child soldiers, and after escaping from war, they tried to write, those memoirs because they faced, they faced traumatic, distress, and how they say how to escape that, they have to write. Writing is part of, escaping from traumatic symptoms. That's why, they wrote those memoirs, so as to escape from it.
Okay, thank you very much. Give everything that you have already tried. And as you may have noticed, the first three presentations were all about the abuse of the lower segment or the most fragile segment of the society, meaning women in the first presentation and children in the last presentation. And what is most interesting in the presentation, I think, is the way that the candidates or the people who presented tackle the issue with the freedom of writing, meaning what is their prime interest here is how these authors write about the traumatic experience. So if we have to proceed with the second part of the panel, and the second part is the statistical. And normally we have yes, we have
20 minutes.
Yeah.
20
So
minutes.
if you could reduce that to 20 minutes. Yeah, 20 minutes. So I would invite the panelists to come back and do their seats. Yes. Miss Awa, could you talk about cooperation? Okay, as it was said by the director of the faculty, but also by the director of the LARAC, this is not just for asking questions and listening to the people who present, but it is a way to help them, better their presentation, but also their tools. So not only are you invited to ask questions, but also because you receive your comments in how to improve the work that has been presented. So the floor is yours.
Tu as moins 5 au devoir.
Il y en a so much.
Tu as moins 5 au devoir.
J'ai une question. I have a question.
Yes.
Well, it's just one question and a short suggestion,
Yes.
if you allow me. Okay, the suggestion is for BALDE, because I've noticed that he's using 6 authors. Personally, I find it too much. Maybe 2 or 3 authors, because don't forget that for each other you have a number of works to deal with. Now, using 6 authors, I find it too much. Maybe you should think about trying to find out which authors fit much better your work and stick to those authors instead of using six authors. Now the question is for Khardiata. Very simple question. That is, here you're talking about daddy issues. I guess that is kind of a type of relationship between male and female. And if you read The Slave Girl, you notice that the type of relationship we have is kind of superiority, or women are just like properties for men. If you remember, Ojabeta was sold by her brother because the brother had the right to sell his sister and so on. So how would you interpret this contrast in the relationship male and female in Emecheta's works? Thank you very much.
guess, I would need him to reformulate his question. I think I didn't grasp it well.
Okay, so I will be very clear. That is, if you read The Slave Girl, you see that at a certain moment, Ojebeta was sold by her brother, because in their culture, the brother had the possibility to sell his daughter if he needs it. You see, this type of relationship they have. That is, the woman is like a property for the man. Okay, he can sell it or do whatever he likes with that. Now, here in Guandolan, the fact of using daddy issue is kind of saying, just like saying, well, instead of imposing you, I'm just trying to find ways and means to get what I need from you. It's got kind of a passive corruption between brackets. So you see this difference in relationship between male and female. That's what I'm talking about. I don't know if you guys.
I understand what you mean. The question, if I get it right, is that in The Slave Girl, Ojebeta sold his sister.
Ojebeta is sold by his brother.
Sold by his brother. And you think like from that, it is seen that women are seen as only object, like in just almost all Gucci and Machita's novels. So from what I get, the question is, rape in Guandolan, it's just another passive way of imposing one's force on women, isn't it? That?
Yeah.
Okay. I do share that point in some sense, but the article I wrote, it's not, I didn't write it from the angle of the oppressor, but I wrote it from the angle of the oppressed one. I was more thinking about the psychology, because there is, even though it's not kind to say, but there are people that are more prone to being rape victims. Not to justify what the rapist did, but there are women or sometimes men that are more prone to being victims of rape because of their background, what they lived, the type of childhood they had, and which has made them so fragile that they became the perfect victim. But I do agree with you in the sense that rape is just another way of man in this situation, because women also sometimes do rape. In this situation, it's another way of them imposing the power that they have on women. Because here it is men, it is the father, and the other father figure, Uncle John. Isn't it that?
Yeah.
I get you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor. Okay, so thank you, colleagues, for your good presentation. Really very simple, clear, and very interesting. Maybe a few remarks concerning Dr. Khadidiatu's presentation. First, of course, concerning the form. Yeah, I think we try to mix two things. Past and present.
Even in my field, yes.
Really?
Yes.
So this is one mistake. Normally, when you analyze, you use the present tense. But for example, here, you're giving the reasons for the behavior of Gordon. Yes, you may use the past tense, for example. The lead or unlead. Yes. The relationship between children and their parents are often being central for thinkers who are. Why do you say who are? Not in pride, but they are concerned with, or they are interested in human psychology. Okay? So you need to use the present tense instead of the past tense. For example, you say, Gordon suffered because she had been. What do you say suffered? Do you mean she's no longer suffering?
Yeah.
I did it because I was influenced by the sentence that came. You know, sometimes when you start speaking in the past, you are sometimes compared to just
definitely.
Right.
So suffers because she was settled. I don't know exactly. Let's say try settled. Okay, you say at a quite young age. You know what I'm saying? At quite a young age. At quite a young age. Is it? at a very young age. It's simply that
Yeah.
and you have to command of the language. Really, this is very good. But sometimes you have to use a simple style. Okay? And this is really, I think, good quality for all researchers. Now, concerning the form, nothing to say apart from the fact that it lacks the word itself, lacks what I call theoretical framework.
Yeah, it's my
Ah,
question.
Where are the theories?
Yeah.
Are they mentioned here?
It's my
They are
question.
mentioned in the article.
But
The first facts,
In the introduction.
like, yeah, the introduction of the articles. I spoke about the theoretical
Theory
framework.
have
Yeah, it's one.
I use psychoanalysis.
Psychoanalysis?
Yeah, and I also.
Trauma theory. Trauma theory.
Yes. Psychoanalytic criticism and Melanie claims.
Very good.
Yeah, I used a lot of interactive criticism.
Yes.
But since it was the abstract,
Okay.
I didn't write. I wrote it in the
It's
introduction.
important. The theories
Even in the abstract, you should
I should write it in the
Yeah.
abstract. What about the title? I have to write it in the abstract.
You don't need to write everything. Like this.
Right, so
Yes.
what about the title?
Mention, for instance.
Production?
Just mention.
I mean,
Can I have the floor?
I'm asking because I
Yes.
have a problem with titles.
title.
All the time
We are
I
going to explain.
I have a suggestion about the title. Hadi, go ahead.
Yes, no, he's not done. Go
I'm
ahead.
not yet here.
Are you not
Now,
done?
doctor, I'm not doctor. This is amen. It's a prayer. I want to say our Mama Duba. Okay, our Mama Okay, yes, the same one. Really very good. The topic is very interesting, but for me it lacks originality. You must be original. You talk about feminism. This is an old work. Please try to see how to think outside the box. Something back. For example, what I would suggest you to do is to see how you can tackle this issue from the perspective of aesthetics.
Aesthetics, yes.
For example, to say the feminist ethics in Armas, 2000s, etc., and Morrison's Paradise. See what I mean? So you analyze the issue of feminism through ethics. That would be really original, because this topic is really overworked. You can be more efficient. Okay? It's a suggestion, but anyway, you will see with your supervisor what is appropriate. For concerning Mr. Alpha, I think you have to be more precise in your presentation. Be very short, brief. We don't know where you're getting at because everything is mixed up. You have to be very clear. What is the purpose of your work? What do you want to do? What are the theories on which you are going to base your work, etc., etc. Okay. I will suggest you an important question about the life of the author. That will help you enlighten, I think, some problems. So you must use new historicism, for example,
Yes.
in this regard. New historicism. Since you want to refer to the life of the author so as to better understand what happens. Usually it's something interesting. You can go to Professor Diallo. She can help you, I think, in this regard. Thank you very much. Yes.
So can I just say a word about, so thank you all of you. Well, I missed some presentation because I am baby caring at the same time. So I need to go and check my babies in the office before they break up everything there. So thank you very much. I had the chance to listen to Mrs. Ba's presentation, which is really interesting, original. And it is no surprise also, as we had the opportunity to be part of his PhD thesis, which was really interesting also, and which talked about issues that were not so much dealt with, in research activities here. But in the abstract, I have read also your article, but it's the same problem I have seen when I read the article you sent. The abstract should not be long, but also we should know from the abstract what is the what of the work and the how. It should be also in the abstract. In the abstract, you should say, in this article, tries to show this. This is a what. The main objective of the article is this, is the what, but how. your reader also need to know how are you going now to work out that main objective that you put in the abstract. It's not a way to say things into the details, no, but just give the gist and you know, a main idea of how are you going to work out that objective that you have in the work. So it would be great, I don't know if you have put it in your abstract, but it would be great also if you could put the abstract that you are going to study this issue, the issue in the work of Emecheta. But in doing so, I will lean on this sort of theory or this in order to see how this is shown in the book, etc. And you explain, your reader has an idea of what is the work about even before they can step into the article and, you know, read it whole. So this is something I wanted to, and he asked my question. It was the same question I had. What are the school of thought that you use in order to back up your analysis? As you said you will use Freud psychoanalysis, yes, as you talk about post-stress traumatic disorder, because you talk about the 3 F's, flee, that the rape, those who are raped sometimes, either they can shout or flee, they can run away, or fall, or even freeze, and most of the time they are really frozen as they are afraid. And the research has shown that those who rape them are either the dad or the uncle, and sometimes you have an oppressor and oppression, you know, the domination that exists, and which made that the girl or the one who is raped can't, you know, speak or, you know, voice the problem they have. And I would ask, I don't know if you have read maybe Michel Foucault's work on rape. He talks about rape as a power domination, a power relationship. Rape is not male and female, no. It is a power relationship that the rapist has upon the one that is raped. So it would be interesting if you could read the history of sexuality, where he talks about where sex relationship comes from, what was it in the antiquity, how it has, you know, changed over time, and what it is now. I think it would be interesting if we can talk about this aspect, this work of the French theorists in the world, and all the people you know about trauma, like Karouf, we have so many people who wrote about rape and the post-stress traumatic rape disorder, how the one who was raped is acting, how she sleeps, the sleep, when can she talk, etc. These are things that have been much, you know, have been written by theorists of trauma and rape. And it's really interesting. I'm sure that if you can change this and America, it will be a really interesting article. For BALDE, I share the same point of view. I'm afraid what we knew in the past, because if you have 4 authors that come from multiple areas, this can make that you won't be able to, you know, look at your scope and have a very focused work. So it would be interesting if you could have 2 authors or 3 at most. I think it would be better. But 4 authors, 5 who come from Asia, Africa, well, it's interesting in terms of comparison. But you should try to really use also the scope of your comparison, so as to go to the heart of the thing and, you know, make a more relevant analysis. Now, I didn't have the chance to get all that you have talked about, but this is a point I wanted to say on your presentation. For my belle-sœur, Awa SAKHO, my daughter, so I had the same remark when she came to me and said she wanted to work on the PhD. I say, feel free to stay in the field of, you know, feminism, but take the approach, you know, the perspective of the style. Those writers try to see how they write the ideas of feminism in terms of aesthetic. It is what I asked her to do, but I sent her to Professor J, and I'm pretty sure that if you have time with her to discuss, he can insist that you put the stress on the style of those authors and try to make the comparison. It will be more interesting than to just talk about the theme that have been, you know, acne theme actually, because they were done and done and done by so many people. So these were the few points I wanted to raise for the time being, and thank you so much for your brilliant presentation.
Yeah, maybe So first of all, I would like to thank you for your presentation and the different insights you brought to these issues. I will start maybe with BALDE. I think like Maurice and Khadidiatou, I believe your project is too ambitious. Not only do you work on 4 authors, but also 6 authors, but also you even plan to compare them with Asian authors. So I don't think you have room for this. If I were you, I would focus on, maybe pick even 3 authors is quite ambitious, I think. And make a close reading of those books and see which aspects, for example, is more interesting. Is it the lived experience of those children? Do you see what I mean? Or is it the traumatic aspect? Or is it about war itself? Because war as a topic has not been really dealt with. I mean, you have some specialists. Professor Oumar worked a lot on war, but rather in American novels. But I think this is a very interesting topic if you narrow it down. You understand what I mean? Select, maybe choose for a start. You see what I mean? Or 3 maximum. And try, because these issues are very relevant. You talked about issues resulting from the discovery of oil resources, and from what I hear, even Senegal is not out of the, you see what I mean, the danger zone. I think it would be interesting to pick your battles. Too ambitious. Don't talk about Sri Lanka or even Asia. Focus on Africa. The one you mastered the most. Okay. And even these authors, I think they are interesting. Ismail Abba, you talk about DIALLO and China. Yeah. Pick 3 of them, and focus on them. And also be focused. Remember, this is a literary study. It is not civilization. And many of you make that mistake. They start commenting on facts, forgetting that they have narratives of focus. And this is something I would advise you, all of you, to always start with a close reading of the text. And then have a literary reading. Yeah, because if you have a close reading, it means you master the narrative. And you are able to agree or disagree with what critics say. No matter how smart or how scholarly they are. Okay. I think also for Awa, I think you need to work on the phrasing of the title. I think you need to narrow it down. I think you can rephrase it in such a way as to reflect your main objectives. Aesthetic would be a good thing. And I think whatever you write about, aesthetic should be dealt with. Even if you talk about war, in the representation of war, there is a certain aesthetic. You see what I mean? It can be in the realism, like Stephen Crane, how it captures. You see what I mean? Or it can be even in the stream of consciousness, how that war is felt or experienced by the soldier. You see what I mean? Aesthetic should be central. Fictional, because you say fictional and feministic writing, I think it is too broad. You need to narrow it down. Yeah, definition of feminism, it's a good thing. Gender oppression, empowerment of women, but which aspect really do you want to deal with? And one question though, because I see you chose Toni Morrison, who's really feministic. And even if you talk about the empowerment, you can find it in many of her novels. Because in her novels, you always have the presence of what we call the ancestor. Look at Pilate dead in Song of Solomon. You have many strong and powerful and unconventional women. I think you need to pay attention to that. But why and because what I see, you take a really hardcore feminist Toni Morrison, and then you take a male author. Why that mixture? Okay. And in the approach also, literary review is good, but look at the biographical information also. Interviews, you see what I mean? Especially when you're dealing with Maurice. She has published essays, and even Alma. Even Alma has published essays. Try to look at those, okay? And also try to, because you're talking about what, empowerment, oppression, maybe resistance in a certain way. Why don't you try to establish a typology? Do you see what I mean? Just like in, you will find it, American literature is a good example. Stereotypes, for example, you have the Jezebel, the Mame, the ancestor. Do you see what I mean? I think it would be good if you succeed in categorizing those words. Okay? Khadidiatou, I share the comments of Khadidiatou and Maurice. The issue also is very burning, because even in our societies, I've seen it even in television. Now people start talking about it. But I would privilege, in the phrasing of the title, the gaslighting, because it will be something that will draw, you see what I mean? Attract a certain, draw attention, gaslighting, or predators in sheep's coat, or like you said, you see what I mean? I think it is more that aspect that we deal with. Also, you talk a lot about trauma, I think, with the author being in bed, as a form of PTSD. I think it would be also very interesting to use psychoanalysis. Okay? I think it would be a good way of rephrasing. And even you can find, beyond MHR, I'm thinking about I know why the cage bird sings.
That's what I did in the PhD. I thought about both of them simultaneously.
Yeah, because when I thought about
here I separated it because I don't know how to condense things, because I have like 15 pages already.
No, just like the narration, like Maya in Hawaii.
Okay.
You see what I mean? Because Maya is so traumatized that she cannot speak.
Yeah.
You understand what I mean? And it is thanks to other women.
She was feeling that if I'm not mistaken,
He's trying to. Okay, I'll let it go. So this is what I wanted to add. Maybe we can discuss more. And also feel free to knock at my door if you want to talk about certain aspects. Or sometimes even if I'm away on Google Meet, we can exchange. Okay? So thank you, moderator.
You said why Alma and Tony Morrison. Yeah. So I thought that it would be more interesting to have two different perspectives, that of a male compared to that of a female. And also why Alma and Tony Morrison is because, first of all, they have two different backgrounds. They are, although they belong to the same period, the 20th century, they have two different backgrounds, two different cultural differences in culture. And also, Alma is, when you see if he's writing, you see that when the recent ones, for example, Mosiah's wife, you see that when he writes, he tends to include African American people in his writing, calling them back into African nation. So that's why I thought it would be a good comparison between the two. Since he is like to be more interested in not only African people, but African people also, African people. That's why I.
In terms of comparison or in terms of contrast?
I'm doing some search. You will compare and contrast.
Maybe I can add just one word. That is about Alma. You see that even if he's a male writer, we notice that if you take fragments and of that rising she's talking about, you see that women tend to occupy better positions in those writings. And this is more visible in Osiris Rising, where us and Tete are at the center of everything that is being done through the Manda group. So women really, they tend to occupy better positions in the fight for all kind of situations. In Fragments, we have Nana, the grandmother, etc., all those things. So it simply means that Arma tends to give a better image to African women. She's now giving more power, better roles, and different from what they used to do in African literature.
So this is a rationale. It is very important to emphasize that.
Mm.
Yeah, I really do think that it's not a problem of male writers, feminist, yes, because I have worked with Samuel Ousmane and Bounama, whom I think are among the, best hardcore feminists in their writing.
Yes.
You see that women are given, best representation as the main figures of change in their writing. Women are the main figures. So I do not have a problem with that, and just about the presentation of Mrs. Awa. But I think that Maurice that had a concern about the aesthetic dimension. I think that the title itself has attempted to address these issues. Because when she says fictional and feminist writings, in my understanding, she wants to talk about aesthetics. Maybe you will have to find ways to do
poetics.
But my understanding, she has already taken into consideration that aspect. But Mrs. Awa, you said that the African version of feminism is different from the Western version, which is true. Okay. But now my question is does Toni Morrison embrace the African version of feminism, or would you consider Toni Morrison as somebody who is a representative of the Western version? Okay? This is a question. And now the comment is about the provisional outline. The first part of your outline is devoted to the review of literature. You have the review of literature, prisoners of feminism, and comparative study of the form. Yes, that's right. To me, it is too much to give a whole part to the review of literature. You could at least just give it a whole chapter, but not a whole part, because that part is not directly or mainly focused on the writers. You were now talking about some critics, some books, etc. It's interesting, but maybe just a chapter. Another comment to yes, Alpha. Alpha, yes, I know, and as I said, Alpha, he got too much information, and yes, generally too much information kills the information. So you just have ways to narrow down your scope. You're not invited to develop all your but just try to talk about the most important issues. In that way, that would be more. Now, number two, yes, about the choice. I do agree that 6 of the too much. I told you so. But I think that he has an answer because for each of the 6 authors, he has taken, I think, just one number. But still, you could have narrowed it down to 4. Because, yes, I think that the problem is it's a very difficult, choosing. when you have already invest a lot in reading 6 interesting authors, sometimes you don't know who to pay, who to keep, and who to believe. But yeah, that's how I invite you. So you will definitely have
welcome to focus.
but you will have one or two that you have that we give more meaning and more time for us really on all the efforts. If not, you will not be very focused on it. Yes.
We're not together.
Yes.
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 But in your phrasing, I mean,
Yeah.
heading, you don't need to mention only
Yeah.
5,
6.
4 or 3.
6.
Of course, 4. Or maybe 3.
Even 4 is quite high.
Three authors.
And I had so many problems.
Yeah, this is the problem. When you have too many books, you
I
have
mean,
problems.
for my dissertation, I picked too many authors, but I ended up dropping one.
Yes, because you have problems.
Just to finish. It's gonna be
2 novels, 3
and move
novels,
on
that's
with my
enough.
life. You have to be realistic.
The title.
The title, yes, okay, some book.
Yes, some book, even the title, you will have to rephrase, yes. Some book is no need to mention some book. Those were trauma, if it's made about, etc., yes.
Even the way the title is.
Yeah, well, you need to focus. Now, there's just one point I wanted to make about the review of the literature. I think there was a great debate, even here at the department, when Baidala was here. How should we proceed? I think here the main question is, why do you do a review of literature? At the beginning, you do it to gather as much information as possible. In that case, it doesn't disturb me to have even a long review, because I think it is a major step in your research. Because if you don't know what has been said, that's why even I think with Awa, I imposed her to give me a review, like quite long at the beginning, because I think this is the most important step in your work, and it is never lost, because after you can split to the different parts. Review of literature can help you show the originality of your work in your introduction. Do you see what I mean? And after, even throughout the parts, you use the review of the literature, because sometimes you agree, sometimes you don't agree with the critics. Do you see what I mean? Then you can, but at the beginning, it is always good to spend. That's why even it's not time wasted. When you, sorry, I have a bad cold. When you start, make sure you spend a long time gathering resources, because after you will go very fast. You understand what I mean? Okay. Now about male and female authors, I don't have a problem mixing them, because even if you look at the romantic authors, you will see that the male authors sometimes were more feminist than even the female authors. You see what I mean? Because they really deal with women's problem. But the thing is, even if it's not male or female, always in the introduction, it is always good to give the rationale behind the choice of your author. Do you see what I mean? To say this is the reason why. Do you see what I mean? Because not only do you deal with transnational authors, but even the gender is totally different. Do you understand? So that's why you have to show the similarities, in these courses. That's why I was talking about comparing or contrasting. Most of the time, it is better if they have similar discursive practices. Do you see what I mean?
So I wanted to have the floor. So for the choice of my topic, I talked about many writers. So I wanted just to compare African and non-African child surveys, because I read an article where it is said child soldiers exist only in Africa. And when I make my research, I found that not only in Africa, in other countries like Sri Lanka, is where I found the same mastery as a child soldier. She wrote about the civil war, starting by the starting point of the war, life experience, trauma, and the causes of the war, and why she was recruited. You see, and I say now I will compare the African and non-African, like Ismail Ba in Sierra Leone. I think even in my dissertation, I wrote about Ismail Ba and Uzodimma Ewala from Nigeria. Ismail Ba is from Sierra Leone. You see, that's why I say in my PhD. So I will widen the topic. You see,
Don't widen it too much. You will, when you do so, you will get lost. This is a problem. It's good to compare, but if you compare too much using too many elements, then you will get lost. This is a problem.
And
you say
why don't you pick, why don't you pick a representative Asian and the representative
African? Simple.
Two or
Just
even,
two, yeah.
I don't know, or three, but representative one.
so if I can have two African and non-African.
But not all African, just Asian or African. And you compare, but don't be in Asia, in Africa, and in the States. So original actually.
And Balde, remember also, the objective of your dissertation is not to answer back to an article,
No, you cannot.
but to study
Analyze.
how.
Yes.
You see what I mean?
Bring
The
your
life of
contribution.
those soldiers
You don't
is
react to an
represented.
article in your
Do you see
PhD.
what I mean? Yeah. So you have to pick your battles.
I really concur with the topics. It's good. It will allow you to give kind of a cross-analysis. of
Yes.
what happened in Africa
And elsewhere.
in Asia. But you just see maybe one or two of them
Reduce the scope.
in Asia.
Tu vas pas comme ça, ça va pas être convaincu, mais tu vas tout ton sujet.
But I have just started, to work about.
But stop and go back to the beginning and change the things. Yes, this is the aim of this presentation. You are on the right track, not on the right track. So go back to your step and change things in order to
This is
be
the best
at
thing
the
you can
right destination in the end. Have you?
Yeah. So you just
Ça va pas être convaincu, hein, le pauvre.
So
Oui.
they talk about life experience and trauma. You see, so I wanted to know if I can.
now, I think what we carry is not exclusive. All this information you can use even in the discussion. You remember Maurice can say you focus on the narratives and then you can open up and make comparisons. Do you see what I mean? We have the similar case in this and this novel. Do you see what I mean? Yeah, but the thing is, if you want to, comme on dit, il veut trop embrasser.
Mal-être. Il est trop embrasse mal-être.
C'est ce que je voulais dire en anglais. Mal-être. Au final, tu vas rien.
More than you can show.
Yes.
So you have to pick your battles. Okay? But I think it would be a good thing to restrain. Yeah, maybe we can read Ame's comments. I don't know if we can hear him, but he's saying, but he's not hearing well, first of all. Congrats to LARAC. Large topics are always a constraint. We are passionate at the beginning, but over the years we realize that we have not been pragmatic. I think this is the same thing because, and then he said, I remember having all the works from Armand and Gouye, and that was almost a nightmare.
Yeah.
So he experienced it. Be careful.
This is what he is saying to him.
He wants to avoid that nightmare for you.
C'est remarque.
Okay, so I think all of you.
Mame has something to say. it's time, and many remarks have been made. Apart from Mr. Balde's topic with the titles, for Khadidiatou, yes, so we do give a break period, and Professor J has talked about marriage, because I know it's a picture, and I don't know if it's maybe after more information about this, about the words of the worst night, also feminist approach or topic of feminism, Toni Morrison. So feminism is that by Toni Morrison, different angles presented about slavery in New York, and say the decriminalizing power of slavery on women, and also the worst act, also the down oppression or women who are down oppressed by black and white men, also for all these families also.
Yeah, that's it. Yes, this was just the beginning. We have other opportunities for this. And
the question of ours. You asked a question to our about black feminism or African feminism. It's really interesting to say, because
what I wanted to say is
this question is really important to answer for people.
oh yeah,
African or black feminism.
Western feminism. So what I want to say is that according to my research and what I've read, Toni Morrison's writings are a reaction to Western feminism, because Western feminism is only focused on white men. So influential writers like Toni Morrison decided to write to show the experience of black women in America. Yeah. And I can say that it is a little similar to the African feminism that is in Alma's writing, because Alma does not want to show really that men are equal to women. But he wants to show, what he shows is that women can do what all men do. And if you read his novel, 2000 you see that all the girls and the women are taught to fight and to do all the training that men do. It's a little bit silly.
Khadis workers,
Humanism.
Well, it is the essay is in search of a mother's guide.
My problem is that I don't think that nowadays we have such a thing as African feminism and American feminism. Because these days, you would see an American who would have hardcore, an African who would have hardcore feminist ideas, and you would see an American who would have a different, more African version of feminism. Like if you see someone like what is the name again? The woman, the Nigerian woman, you like so much. Happy feminism. Like you would see her and comparing her to someone like maybe an American. There are certain American writers who are not that hardcore than her. I think like these days we are in a globalized world.
But is she Nigerian or American?
She's a Nigerian and Nigerian American. She's a Nigerian who went to live in the States.
Who went to live in the States,
but she called herself a happy feminist.
Yeah,
she's not a hardcore feminist.
No, I'm not saying hardcore in the sense of angry or vindictive. But these days, you see, like when you talk about people like Emecheta, for instance, or Cindy Wemagona, or the woman again, I forget again her name. What is her name? Chimamanda. They all have different versions of feminism. Of course. So if you categorize and say this is African feminism and this is American feminism, I sometimes have an issue with that.
Yeah, even American feminism, you have to be
different
careful.
African feminism, black
American
feminism, and white
you have
feminism.
black feminism.
We have black feminism,
You have
African
soft
feminism, and
feminism.
white feminism.
Yeah. And even Morrison is very hard to grasp. Because sometimes she's extreme feminist, and sometimes she sees a relationship as
Depends.
a form of complement.
Yes, I guess it depends on the psychological maturity of the white.
In Song of Solomon, for example, she's really harsh towards men, you know. And she would even insult men because, you know, she uses really crude words. You see what I mean to describe men as an oppressor, an abuser, a rapist. You see what I mean? But in other works, you see, you know, it's rather, you know, man and woman, you know, have to live together. You see what I mean? The same way Alice Walker perceived that. But also, I think I advise you to look at black feminist criticism.
Black feminism, African feminism,
Baroque Christian,
white feminism,
Bell hooks.
Yeah, all those people will
bell
allow
hooks,
you
yes, anti-woman.
to understand the complexity of feminism.
And maybe one thing also that you can comment. I wanted us to talk, but I'm taking it. Or let us stop. We can come back and.
No, okay, thank you very much. Yeah, so yes, we have to start here and then come back.
I would say that I'm so humbled by the task ahead because a couple of years ago I was here in my work and receiving so many feedbacks from all of my professors, and here we are. And thank God I did go through the whole thing. I got my PhD under the guidance of Professor Babacar, and I owe you so much. I mean it every time that we're together actually, because the kind of feedbacks I received from you. And when you were talking about the story where you have these people. Thank you so much.
Slow down.
He's American from Alabama.
So when Professor Dieng was talking about, some of the students that he has and who is sometimes mad at him, I thought about my own case because after a while, I was thinking to myself that all these professors are like, uncles to me, family members. But with the PhD, I knocked at Professor Babacar Dieng's door. We started working, and the guy was looking at me in a very different way. I said, "What the hell is going on?" I said to myself that maybe he had grudge against me. But after a while, he told me, there's nothing wrong between the two of us. You have to produce work under my name, and you have to do it the best way possible.
And your mother.
Yeah, and my mother. Well, she did not want to talk to me after a while because she was like, you're no longer progressing. So she took back my classes, everything that I had, but I don't care about whether or not you suffer or not. I need a PhD and you're delivering to me. And thank God that's what happened.
And high quality work. Yeah. Really. I mean, his work was praised by my colleagues.
And so I just would like to show how thankful I am towards all of you guys, because without you I would not make it. So if I'm here, it is only just to tell you how humbled I am by the task ahead and how grateful I am. And just to tell you that you can also benefit from this the purchase that we're going to have, because that's what's going to help you in the end, having feedbacks. Because the end game, the goal here is to improve your work. And that's only that. That's what's going to help you in the end. So we are going to go for the whole job. We are supposed to hit the road, and we have the first PhD candidate here, first student, Désirée. I think it's the first time that I'm meeting you. Master 2. Oh, a Master 2. Oh, that's great. Yeah, that's great. That's it. Okay. Oh, that's very bold of you. Great. And Désirée, an MA student, actually she's about to finish up her work, but she is going to present on the following topic: religious disobedience in Dr. Faustus and by Christopher Marlowe, and death in Ousmane by Wallace Reika. And also, I don't know how you are going to approach the topic because Christopher Marlowe, an Elizabethan playwright, and Wallace Reika, 20th century and 21st wife, playwright, an African and a British. How are you going to tell us more about this topic later?
Shall I start?
Of course.
Okay, good afternoon or evening, everyone. It's a great honor to me to be in front of you today and have the opportunity to present my work in front of our learned professors. So I have chosen as a topic religious disobedience in Dr. Faustus by Christopher Marlowe and Death and the King's Horseman by Wole Soyinka. And as Professor Bounama said, it is quite it will be quite an uncommon approach because we have an African writer on the one hand from the 21st century and an Elizabethan author named Christopher Marlowe, whom people are generally not familiar with, but he is a contemporary writer alongside with Shakespeare. But why the topic of religious disobedience? I must precise that I'm working on the topic with Dr. NGOM. So I first chose or entitled the topic The Supernatural in Dr. Faustus by and Death and the King's Horseman. But I noticed that I had difficulty in finding a proper research question on the one hand and a proper literary theory to approach the topic. So religious disobedience, as to say, is just a pretense to be able to talk about, to make a link between psychology and the supernatural, because the supernatural will be my primary focus. So it is to make a link between the supernatural and psychology, while at the same time having the opportunity to find a proper research question and a proper literary theory to approach the topic. So that's it. Now I think I may proceed with a short summary of the two plays, because they are plays, for you to better grasp the scope of the topic. Now I will start with Death and the King's Horseman, which is a play written by Soyinka and was written in 1975. So the play opens on a marketplace where Elessine Oba, the protagonist of the play, is followed by his praised singer, and he goes to meet the women of the village to bid them farewell. Il leur dit adieu. Farewell, why? Because Elessine is about to be sacrificed. It is the story happens in an ancient village of Nigeria, and the tradition at the time was that when the king of the village dies, his horseman, the man who is in charge of taking care of his horses, should die or should commit suicide in order to allow his king to make the passage to heaven from the world of the living to the world of the dead. So if this ritual is not achieved, there will be disorder in the world of the living. So Elessine bids farewell to the women at the market, followed by his praised singer, and they eulogize him or praise his deeds, for he is about to go to the world of the late elders. But Elessine, however, seems to be distracted by some worldly concerns, because we must know that Elessine is a man who is very concerned, or who is
very pleased with worldly pleasures. He loves women, he loves fame, he likes good food, etc. So Ellison is distracted, although he does not voice it, but he is distracted by these worldly pleasures. And when at the marketplace he sees a woman, a young woman, he says that he wants to marry her, although the woman is already betrothed to a man, and she already has a husband. But Ellison demands that he should get the wife for him to let a seed which means a new baby, before he goes to the other world. So that's it. Now Ellison, however, is about to fail in performing the ritual suicide. Why? Because he put sexual pleasures over his honor. Because in choosing the last moment for him to take a new bride, he in some sense gets distracted from his upcoming task, which is to commit the ritual suicide. Things get worse when the colonial administrator of the village is informed of the matter, because he will do his best in order to prevent Ellison from committing the ritual suicide, because in European culture, especially in their Christian religion, suicide is prohibited. So he sends the policemen to go and arrest Ellison, which they do. But in the meantime, it is the son of Ellison, who was studying abroad in England, who comes back to the village, because he knows that when his father dies, it is he, as a successor, who will take the place of his father as the horseman, as the new horseman. So when he is informed that his father was arrested, he is certain that the ceremony will not take place as it was expected, and he takes the place of his son, and it is he who is of his father, and it is he, Olunde, it is his name, who is going to be sacrificed in lieu of his father. So it is this shift in perspective that around which the play turns. So instead of the father being sacrificed, the real horseman, as it was prescribed by the Yoruba religion, it is the son who takes the place, and in such there is disorder in the world. And the women say that we must no longer focus on the world of the living and the dead, but the unborn. And it is this concern that Soyinka, through this metaphor, we must understand that Soyinka is concerned about the future of the African religions through their encounter with the Christian religion that was brought by colonialism. Now, for Dr. Faustus by Christopher Marlowe, Faustus is a theologian, a highly learned man, and he is a Christian who masters anything about the sciences of theology, of medicine, of law, of arts and humanity, and the art of reasoning, but is still unsatisfied with his knowledge. He wants to know more. But as a consequence, he decides to turn to necromancy. Necromancy, also known as magic, la sorcellerie. And through necromancy, he wants to uncover the mysteries of the hidden world. And in this sense, he wants to become like a god. So for this purpose, he summons two experts in magic, and they teach him the fundamentals of necromancy. Now, when Faustus is alone in his study room, and starts reciting magical incantations, a devil comes from hell, named Mephistopheles, and appears before him. Now, Mephistopheles appears in such an ugly and terrifying shape that Faustus tells him to go back to heaven and come to hell, and comes back in a more friendly appearance, because he could not bear his sight. Now, Faustus is informed by Mephistopheles that he appeared from hell because Faustus has cursed the Holy Trinity of Christianity. And Faustus signs a deal with the devil according to which if he is given 25 years of absolute power, at the time of his death, he will sell his soul to Lucifer, who is the king of hell. Now Faustus ignored all the bad omens and warnings he received from the good angel, and following the bargain, Faustus travels around the world with the devil, with Mephistopheles, and uses his new magical powers, not as expected to learn, to acquire new knowledge, but he uses his power to play tricks upon people. So here also Faustus is distracted by his powers. Now at the end, the man indulges in sin in the sense that he is drowned by his magical powers, and he did not use them in beneficial ways. So at the end of the play, Faustus is supposed to go back to hell, and he is fetched up by the devils, by Lucifer and Mephistopheles. And although he regrets his deeds at the end, there is no possibility for him to repent because it is too late. So these are the main synopsises of the two plays, Death and the King's Horseman and Dr. Faustus. Now coming to the similarities between the two plays, we have two protagonists who are at the climax or at the zenith of their lives at the beginning of the plays. For, as we said, Faustus is a highly learned man. He knows everything about, he gets all the wealth he needs to subsist, but he needs more. And Death and the King's Horseman, when with Elisine Oba, who is at the zenith of his life too, and he is taken care of, but he also fails in accomplishing his task of perpetuating the tradition. The two protagonists also prefer worldly pleasures about heaven to heavenly ones, and they both ignore the warnings they receive. Both also go against the rules dictated by their different religions, as they disturb the order of things. And that's the reason why, in my analysis, I would like to focus on, or at least to evoke, the theme of order and disorder, which was very present, like in the plays of Shakespeare in Elizabethan literature. Also at the end, both protagonists are overwhelmed with despair and regret. But as Dr. Jan said last year, you told us not to focus only on the themes. So in choosing two plays, I also wanted to focus on the imagery and language of the plays. So in the two plays, we notice a very high religious imagery and language, because when we read Death and the King's Horseman for the first time, for example, you can read up to 10 pages without understanding the message of the play, because you need to have a background concerning the Yoruba religion first. Now I think I can move to the theme of religious disobedience in itself by opening it with a quotation by Jared Bridges. 2 minutes left. Okay. So I can move to the essence of my topic itself. So in analyzing the in these two plays, one African and one British, I want to insist through the topic of religious disobedience about the psychological motivations of the two characters, why they choose to disobey and why they are distracted by, for example, lust, their pleasure for women, they are also distracted by worldly pleasures, but also by, how I can say, they are also distracted by the fear of death. Hence, my psychological analysis of these three characteristics. So for the outline, I will choose a down-to-earth, if I may say, outline by talking first about the motivations or causes, second, motivations, and third, the consequences of the religious transgressions of the three characters. So on the whole, that was my research project, and through further research in the course of my research, I think we will have a more detailed analysis. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you so much. I think without further ado, we are going to ask Awa BAKHOUM. Is Kalidou online?
Okay.
So we are going to proceed. We have here Awa BAKHOUM dealing with history and culture in August Wilson's Pittsburgh cycle. Well, I don't know how you are going to define the two, because you cannot talk about history without dealing with culture and vice versa. But you will tell us more about his topic, and you have 15 minutes for it.
So, thank you. Good evening, dear professors. Good evening, dear Kamal students. So, as he said, my name is Awa BAKHOUM, and I'm a first year PhD student. And I work under the supervision of Professor Yang. So, my subject study is entitled History and Culture in August Wilson's Pittsburgh Cycle. So, why this topic and why the author or the playwright? August Wilson is one of the most prolific dramatists of his, one of the most prolific modern dramatists, not to say the most. And he has written a series of 10 plays entitled Pittsburgh Cycle or the Century Cycle. Pittsburgh Cycle because all the plays but one are set in Pittsburgh, which is the hometown of August Wilson. And why Century Cycle? Because each play focuses on one decade of the 20th century. So this is the other two names which we use to refer to the series. So in these plays, the main aim is to trace the history of African Americans at exposing the true version of the history. Because from the playwright's point of view, African Americans didn't benefit from the white version of history because they didn't have neither possibility nor the intellectual tools to write their own history, because they wasn't allowed to read or to write. So it was the whites who had written their story and which have misrepresented, changed it for their own, for their favor. So for reason it was time to change that part of the history. So his mission was to expose, to show a disregarded history had to be reclaimed. History this time written by those who experienced the history. And when we say history, we mean all the elements going from enslavement to racism and segregation. So for him, his main aim was to expose, to write that history, because blacks were the only person who were able to write that same history, because they were the one who experienced it, not the whites. So first, then when we read the plays, we have noticed that in the plays, the main question which is represented is, what do you do when you are lost and you don't know where to go? So a question which Wilson has given the answer as, you go back to your roots. And going back to your roots meaning going back to Africa and all its cultural heritage. And when we talk about African American history, firstly, as Mr. Bounama had said, we will possibly talk about the cultural legacy which derived from it. And that cultural heritage comprises music, especially blues, storytelling, community bonding, etc. And the return also is not symbolic. It's not about coming back to Africa, but it is symbolically, psychologically coming back to Africa by accepting all the heritage which derived from it. Because when we also read the plays, it is noticed that the characters are presented as lost and disconnected from their past, and the connection they can't find it back only if they reconnect with their past. And also it is a loss of identity which is represented in the plays, because one of the major effects or consequences of slavery is a loss of identity. So each of the plays in this investigation reaffirms some aspect of the recast identity, with characters who are in constant quest for themselves, a constant search for a spiritual but also for a cultural reconnection. So if we take the example of some of the plays or some of the main characters like Harold Loomis, Boy Willie, Bernice, they have experienced an identity crisis. At a point in the plays, they didn't know who they were. The reason why is because they didn't acknowledge their history as American from African descent. So he shows in his plays that the only way to find back one's identity is to get in touch with one's history, but also to get in touch with everything that is related to that story, which is the culture. So taking into account these aspects, this study will mainly endeavor to answer the following questions, which are: how does history manifest itself throughout the events of the play? How do history and therefore culture help shape African American community? How is Black American cultural legacy represented throughout the plays, and how does history and culture serve African Americans in their individual quest for identity? So these are the main questions my research will try to answer, which means our objective is to show the role history and culture plays in the daily struggle of the characters. It also aims at demonstrating that the acceptance of one's past allows the African Americans in general, which are represented by the characters in the plays, how it allows them to construct collective, like an identity of the African American community, but also their individual identity as American from African descent. We are also seeking to point out that from Wilson's standpoint, one cannot have a bright future in a positive image of themselves without returning back to the roots, without establishing a link with their ancestors and their history, but also their culture. Additionally, we will also pinpoint that the way to self-realization and self-acceptance, as mentioned, is culture, and the culture also is wide. Now, to achieve the goals regarding the analysis of history and culture in Wilson's century cycle, we will, in addition to plays which make up the primary sources, of course, we will try to use any other works by the authors, but also any ideology or any authors which share the same ideologies as him. Also, for the theories, post-colonial theory concepts such as hybridity, which is formulated in the works of Homi Baba, and otherness, or the double consciousness of William E. Du Bois. Those concepts also will be explored to strengthen our analysis. So the text will include Frantz Fanon, Edward Said, which I am happily waiting for the feedbacks of Dr. Baba, Homi Baba, among others. So this will help to show the stages of the blacks which are shared by both the African side but also by their American side. So these are the theoretical concepts we will use in our research. Now for the outline, for now I have 5 chapters which will probably change as the research goes and with the orientation of my my supervisor. We have 5 chapters, which we deem necessary to separate into 2 subsections. Each chapter is separated into 2 subsections. The first chapter covers the Black aesthetic and Wilson's influences, because an analysis of Wilson's plays necessarily begins with the Black aesthetic, what derived him to write a series of plays in order to rewrite African American history. For the second chapter, we have history as an identity shaper. Here we will show African American quest for identity throughout the cycle. It will focus mainly on the events of the play, which will lead to the discovery of one's identity. So for the third chapter, we have embracing and reclaiming African American cultural heritage. So this chapter deals with the Black culture, particularly blues, everything that related to the culture, music, storytelling, community bonding, and even the language, the African American vernacular language. So this chapter constitutes an important part, and we illustrate also the representation of culture throughout the century cycle. For the fourth chapter, we have the changing historical and social landscape. As I've mentioned, each play focus on one decade of the 20th century. So there is some changing in the timing. This play talks about the Great Migration. The other play talks about racism or the Great Depression or enslavement. So each play focuses on one decade, which means the historical settings also have changed throughout the plays. So this chapter will try to show that those changes in the plays. And the last chapter, the importance of community for African Americans, is the final chapter. So here we shows the importance, because when we read the plays, we see that the characters who are disconnected from the group will suffer more than those who are organized, are part of the group. So in this chapter, we'll try to show how disconnection to the group, particularly, and to the community as a whole, is important and has helped all the characters in the play to achieve a self-realization, find who they were, because they were lost at the beginning and the end of the play, and be in line with their culture and their history as descendants of enslaved who are now free in a land they are part of. So this is a shortened version of my proposal. So I'm hoping to have helpful feedback from you, and thank you for your attention.
No, go for it. You have 15 minutes to tell us more about your work.
Okay, thank you so much for this great opportunity to present our works and get feedbacks from great minds, from your great minds. My dissertation's title is Representation of the Caribbean Rainbow Society in the Narratives of Jamaica Kincaid and Michelle Cliff. And I work under the supervision of Professor Babacar. I have shared the dissertation into 4 parts. The first part is called A Representation of the Natural Attributes, the Colonial History and Women's Situation in the Caribbean. The second part is the Post-Colonial Evaluation of the Caribbean Rainbow Society. The third part is Hybridity as the Major Colonial Legacy in the Caribbean Post-Colonial Society. And the fourth and last part is the Post-Colonial Identity of the Caribbean Rainbow Society. The dissertation's main objective is making an evaluation of the post-colonial socio-cultural situation of the Caribbean. In fact, I try to demonstrate through colonization how the Caribbean became a rainbow society And this main objective is divided into three secondary objectives. The first is representation of the real Caribbean and its colonial history / memory based on the narratives of Kincaid. The second objective is making a diagnosis of the history in order to see how much the Caribbean people suffered, especially women. We will see that women suffered much more than men in the Caribbean colonial society. And the last objective is focused on making an analysis of the impact of the colonial experience of hybridization, identity crisis, alienation on the construction of the Caribbean society in the post-colonial context. My dissertation answered 4 basic questions. The first question is, how do Kincaid and Cliff represent the Caribbean and its colonial history or memory? Second question, what are the outcomes of that colonial history, especially on women? The third question is, how was constructed the region's identity through this colonial experience? And the last question that I answered through my dissertation is how the presence of many races transformed the region into a rainbow society with a strong contribution of Black people. And also, as any dissertation work should be, I have formulated some hypotheses. And the first hypothesis is that the Caribbean would have an uncommon colonial past. The second one is that the history would element, in fact, the region's identity and would inform their literature. Finally, the last hypothesis is that through their history, the Caribbean people would have acquired a mixed identity, constantly evolving with a significant input of Black people. I want to invite you to keep in mind those 3 hypotheses, because at the end we will see if they are confirmed or infirmed. And this dissertation, I have analyzed this topic through 7 novels, 3 novels of Jamaica Kincaid and 4 novels of Michelle Cliff. For Jamaica Kincaid, we have Annie John, the autobiography of my mother, and A Small Place. For Michelle Cliff, we have No Telephone. We have first A Bank, then No Telephone to Heaven, Free Enterprise, and If I Could Write This in Fire. So the first chapter of part 1 deals with the representation and also making a description of the density of and the beauty of the Caribbean, and also the climate. And these issues have been analyzed through A Bank and No Telephone to Heaven by Michelle Cliff. In fact, through these novels, we have seen that huge quantities of water paused on the region, and it makes it a very humid soil favorable to agriculture. So then we see that the success of many crops, especially sugar, have been noticed in the region. In fact, the permanence of water is a cause of the density of the forest. There is a very dense forest in the Caribbean, so it is caused by the fact that there are so much rain in the region. Through these novels also, we highlighted the beauty of the landscape as a key factor of the Caribbean, which participated in raising the Western interest in the Caribbean, as well as helping the slave to endure oppressive situation. So it is confirmed that the Caribbean is a beautiful region, but the geographical limit of the region is not settled yet. In fact, the Caribbean region is stretching across many continents, which makes it very difficult to circumcise, to define. The second chapter of part 1 is first about the link between the concept of history and memory based on definitions we provided from various sources. From our analysis, in fact, the two concepts share the same purpose of representing the past. As a matter of fact, we summoned specialists who agree on the fact that memory is a storage of the past, while history is the study of the past. Both they are somehow connected to each other, and they inform man's desire to know himself and the evolution of his life. The third chapter of part 1 is the illustration of the Caribbean colonial history through the life of Suela in the autobiography of My Mother by Jamaica Kincaid. Like the rest of the Caribbean people, Suela's past is empty. Suela's past is very empty, and she is at the image of the whole Caribbean people. Their past has been kind of removed, and she inherited the Caribbean burden of loss, pain, and identity issues. And in the fourth and last chapter of part 1 is dedicated actually to exposing. I was saying that women suffered much more than men in the Caribbean colonial history. And last part of chapter 1, is dedicated actually to expose the situation of women in the Caribbean history through the narratives of Kincaid and Cliff. In fact, women have suffered a double. They suffered much more than men. In fact, they have been exposed a double marginalization. In addition to colonization, women are oppressed by patriarchal system. They underwent a double pain. The second part of the second chapter, yes, the second part of this dissertation. The second part of this dissertation, study the concept of post-colonialism. I mean, the theories, the genesis, the precursors, and the relation to the Caribbean society. Remember that this dissertation is about colonization in the Caribbean society. The first chapter deals with the post-colonial theory as an event with temporality. It means it starts at a point of time and ends in a very specific point of the time. The second chapter of part 2 studies the effect of colonialism in the Caribbean society. In other words, it studies the impact. The chapter 2 of part 2 studies the impact of colonialization. In fact, we explain how the independence period is legitimately presented as post-colonial. However, in the Caribbean, as we have explained in the dissertation, post-colonial Caribbean, we can consider that it is not completely a post-colonial because we have seen stigmas of colonization in the Caribbean society. The third chapter of part 2 is a demonstration of the degradation of the Caribbean life due to the colonial legacies through the novel A Small Place by Jamaica Kincaid. In fact, in this novel, Kincaid made, she presented the influence of the Western influence on the Antiguan society, and she emphasized the fact that colonial legacies is a plague crippling economically, socially, and culturally her home island, Antigua. And now part 3. Part 3 of this dissertation presented the phenomenon of hybridity as an outstanding legacy of colonization in the Caribbean society. And we have noticed that the main characters of Kincaid and Cliff narratives are all hybrid people with hybrid cultures and hybrid languages. So the first chapter of part 3 is dedicated to the presentation of the several definitions of hybridity, we start this part by defining first the notion of hybridity. In fact, a hybrid is defined here as something or someone made of pieces from two or more distinct origins. And hybridity is the fact that these elements combine themselves or are combined to produce a hybrid body. And the second chapter of part 3, we analyze the hybridity of races in the Caribbean society. In fact, hybridity is presented as we presented a combination of many elements. And Suela is actually Suela and Claire Savage. Suela is from the autobiography of My Mother by Kincaid, and Claire Savage is the main character of Ebeng. Both are hybrid kids born out of the mingling of two different races and two different worlds. The third chapter of part 3 is dedicated to the hybridity of languages. Hybridity does not did not operate only in culture it did not only operate in culture, it also operated in the communication. And we can see that the languages of the colonized and the languages of the colonizer were mixed sometimes to create many dialects called patois or pidgins in the novel Ebeng. And the fourth chapter of part 3 is an analysis of the Caribbean cultural hybridity, which precisely is the meeting and melting of cultures into each other that Walter Lewis called culture collusion. But it is a cultural collusion, but we have observed that during this collusion, one culture is completely soaked into another culture. It is the culture of the colonizer who's been soaked into the culture of the colonizer. So with Kincaid and Cliff, Caribbean identity involves actually the navigation between two worlds. So between two worlds without a clear knowledge of where to enter. And we have called a person in such a situation a white content in a black container. And the last chapter of part 3 deals with hybridity in literature. We first proposed a brief historical reminder of the birth of the Caribbean literature, which is defined as the literature of various territories of the Caribbean region that are written either in Spanish, French, English, or other languages. And that literature reflects the diversity of cultures in the Caribbean. And the literary hybridity is a use of Western languages and writing style to narrate the story of the colonized. Actually, this process.
Kalidou?
Yes, do you hear me?
Well, your time is over, so I'm going to give you, let's say, 1 minute for you to wrap things up.
Yes. Okay, the last part of this dissertation, actually, it was very difficult to try to summarize 300 pages in 15 minutes. So I am going just to move on to the last part directly. So the last part deals with the Caribbean hybrid identity. It is, in this part, we made a quick summary of the events and mentality of the Caribbean people in the post-colonial context. Yes, the third and last chapter of this dissertation, we illustrate the Caribbean identity by Jamaica Kincaid through Annie John, who is a character of the same novel. So, actually, Annie helped us demonstrate the Caribbean is associated to physical as well as psychological pain. Just to finish, I will say that our hypothesis if you remember, our hypotheses, we can say are confirmed. In fact, we have seen that the Caribbean have a common and uncommon colonial history. Yes, the Caribbean colonial history also is unique, and it is also through that history that the Caribbean acquired mixed identity. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you, Kalidou.
Answered my question because it was very difficult from the very beginning to know exactly how she would cover the whole thing, doing that. You know, Christopher Marlowe is an Elizabethan playwright. It is said that he influenced Shakespeare. And here we have the first Nobel Prize in Literature, the first African Nobel Prize in Literature, Wale Soyinka. But, you know, the idea of civil disobedience, as she said, is very visible in the two plays. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah, thank you so much.
He's influenced by some.
Yeah. No, religious disobedience, and she tackled, well, the only thing, that she did that maybe she could reconsider is sometimes you don't have to spend so much time summarizing the two plays, you know, talk about your analysis and that's it. People will get it after all, that it is not just, you know, and you're not supposed to insist on the summary at all. And it was very helpful because we learned a lot, particularly when it comes to Soyinka, because Soyinka is considered to be a very complex writer, a playwright, and you're right to say that if you do not know much about Yoruba religion, you might get lost. Because I was very glad when I heard you talking about, you know, how Yorubas represent the world of the unborn, the world of the living, and the world of the dead. And we can draw a comparison between that and the great chain of beings in the British literature. How, you know, an earthly act can impact the whole universe, you know, and this is something that Shakespeare talked about, but before him, Mame also tackled the issue. So no need for me to go back through your whole presentation. It is just to say that it is very interesting and you will receive the feedback from the different professors. And apart from you, we also had Awa BAKHOUM, who tackled history and culture in August Wilson's Pittsburgh cycle. She started by telling us why it is called the Pittsburgh cycle, knowing that 9 out of 10 plays are focus on Pittsburgh. And it is also called the century cycle because of the fact that for each play cover, let's say, a decade, and it is something that she explained quite well. And she touched many key issues when it comes to African American literature, issues like identity, but the whole fact that African American literature can be seen as a deconstructive enterprise, knowing that history was not, or the way history was written by white Americans did not favor African Americans, and it was their mission actually. And when it comes to creation in African American literature, sometimes you are going to talk about aesthetics, which is very relevant, but we also need to think about things like themes, because here we have always key themes that come back, like identity loss, identity crisis, the quest of, you know, going back to the roots, reconnection with the past, those kinds of stuff. And you elaborated on that. And last but not least, we had Kalidou, who focuses on, what is the title of his presentation again? His dissertation is entitled Representation of the Caribbean Rainbow Society in Jamaica, Kincaid, and Michelle Griff. And he insists on the different parts. Overall, he has 4 parts, and each part is divided into something like sections, chapters. And he said that he wanted to answer 4 basic questions like Caribbean history and memory, and he delved into the meanings of history and memory, and also the outcome of colonization on women, how women suffered a lot. And here maybe something that you could rather think about is, instead of talking about double pain and double jeopardy, you can say maybe multiple jeopardy, because you will see that the sufferings of women is very complex, and it is not only suffering from colonization and from racism, those kind of stuff, but it is a multi-sectorial suffering that is so complex, because it is not an arithmetic situation, but a geometric one, that is race plus, sexism plus colonization, and multiplied by other factors. That's how feminist theoreticians view the whole thing. So maybe you need to insist on multiple jeopardy. You have other concepts like double yoke, but it is a multiple yoke, or rather say, or the triple yoke. These are overall what our candidates talked about, and Kalidou insisted on so many things, and I hope that you've taken notes, and we are going to collect now your reactions. Thank you so much for your attention. Now the floor is yours, and feel free.
Thank you, Dr. Djidiack. It's like to specify that, you ask questions. Your reactions are quite important.
Okay, I have a question. I have a question. Question. I have a question. Question, yes. Just very quick question for Désirée. You talk about religious disobedience. So when we refer to defend the king's horseman and the Yoruba cosmogony, do you think really we can talk about religion here? Isn't it a religious kind of a syncretism or cultural practices that are very present? Okay. But I don't think that's really, well, it depends. Yeah. Do you understand my question?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I raise my hand. Thank you so much. And we are so delighted to hear your brilliant presentations, right? So I just wanted to ask a question to Désirée and Mr. Bach talk about why. And it concerns religion. When we say, for instance, religious disobedience, what is it disobedience? When you say disobedience, there is a relation towards something else. Is it the Western religions that are disobeyed, or it is the religions that are African religions that people believe that they have powers that disobey their own religions? And the other question is that can we talk about religion when there is no rituals or practices, sacred practices? Because I don't really mention that.
Can we talk about
religion? Yes. Because when to talk about religion,
yes,
we need to take into account rituals and practices. Are those kind of powers?
So it is the same question as Dr. Bach.
Yes.
Ahmed says that he's no longer hearing you well. Ahmed Diallo.
En fait, question de micro.
Maybe the people who are going to take the floor, maybe they can speak louder. That is going to help. Yeah, Ahmed.
Yeah, we could hear perfectly when they were presenting, but when it comes back to the audience,
yeah, we don't have a mic.
Yeah, it's a technical problem. Maybe, and I'm asking them to speak louder, like that, so we can hear them.
Perfect. But we are enjoying so far. It's very good.
Thanks so much, man.
Shall I answer the question?
How did you do, like during the previous session? They can answer yeah, maybe we are going to collect the reactions first, and then you will answer. So right now.
Yeah, I mean, as far as also this point is concerned, I think there is a need for Désirée to do some research about, religion. You see what I mean? And also even to adopt several perspectives, because we have the Eurocentric definition of religion, and we have also our own way of, you see what I mean? It's like even take literacy. European, they say, you know, Africans are illiterate. But I mean, now it is proven that some of our fathers had been literate for centuries.
For centuries, yeah.
Because they use Arabic script. You see what I mean? To write Wolof or whatever. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
Some of them have even produced poems and stuff like that. So it is important, you see what I mean, to do research around that. What do you perceive as revolution? Do you have the colonial perspective or do you have the post-colonial one? It depends, you know. So, but I think this would be an important part of your work. The other thing I was thinking about is magic realism. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
Yes.
Yeah, but I mean, I used it in my dissertation because there are certain practices that only magic realism can account for. Maybe you need to look a little bit into magic realistic literature and see how they use, how they represent the supernatural, because those are supernatural events. You see what I mean? Delve into it. I think the topic is very interesting. Like ours, it is a little bit unconventional because people usually they compare similar things. Do you see what I mean? Or I don't know. So I encourage you. Also, the other thing, because both you and Awa, you are dealing with dramas, plays. You see what I mean? It is important also that you do research around drama techniques.
Plotting,
do you see what I mean?
Plots.
Yeah, because it is very important. Drama is a bit different from literature, prose. Do you see what I mean? So try to engage also that aspect. He's not around. No. But anyway, I mean, I can get back to him because the thing is, when I was in Dakar, I've been reading him. I read about maybe 120 pages of his work. But the thing is, at a certain time, that's why I think we should do this very often. We should do this very often, so that you have a good topic, so that you have a good literary review, and so that also, I mean, you don't write, you see, hundreds of pages and then have to change things. Because the thing is, I'm going to have to make him change a lot of things in terms of organization. Because Kalidou talks about the representation of the Caribbean in narratives by Jamaica Kincaid. I think you know Annie John mostly. Mbayang also you know, which is Jamaica and Antigua. But Kalidou gives more voice to other sources. Do you see what I mean? Then you see, when you say you are going to study how the Caribbean is represented, I expect you first of all to tell me which period, do you see what I mean? And also the main focus of their representation, which is colonialism on the one hand, and also the predicament of women. Do you see what I mean? But they have to be separate. But you will notice in the first part, you have what? Representation of the Caribbean, landscape, climate, and you have women in that part. Do you see what I mean? It is a problem. I think what would have been more logical would be to talk about the landscape and stuff. You see what I mean? Then the colonial period, because as in many Caribbean work, you have what? The issue of colonization, colonial education, alienation, and even hybridity. I think it belongs to that part, because it is a legacy of colonialism. And then as women suffer from a double jeopardy or a multiple jeopardy, it would have been more logical to put women after. Do you see what I mean? Yeah, that's why I think, I'm serious, I think we need to hold this as often as possible, even if it is for 2 hours. You see what I mean? So that, you know, all the professors, because professors are busy also, so they can come, even if need be, maybe we can have lunch together or whatever, you know, so, you know, and listen to the students. Because the thing is, sometimes we are overwhelmed, and by the time we are able to read the student thoroughly, the student had wasted pages and pages. Do you see what I mean? Yeah, so I think that's why, I mean, with Awa, I think at least we are starting with the review of the literature. I haven't forgotten. The thing is, I'm overwhelmed, you know. if I tell you that I read over 600 pages in 1 month, you know, it's crazy. I think maybe we need to squeeze and diminish, you know, the length of our dissertations. But I'll get back to you very soon.
A suggestion about material review. I think sometimes it's really interesting if students could integrate it into the work, the homework, as in not making it a part of itself. Sometimes it's boring to just
more interesting.
It's
more interesting to integrate it in the study.
But if you integrate it, it
doesn't have a part.
Yes.
Yes, that's a very relevant point. And one thing also that we can do, sometimes when I see students who dedicate their first part to a thematic study and then deal with aesthetics in the end. No, you have to mix the two instead of, you know, because both words is like saying time and space. How are you going to dissociate the two? You know, they go together.
But one good thing, because at the beginning I think it's good to have a literary review apart. But what you should do maybe as you do your literary review, to think about which part you can use it for. That's why even in class, sometimes when I have you read articles, what do I ask you? I ask you an evaluation of the article. What could this article be helpful for? Do you see what I mean? When you are doing the literary review, think about, for example, if it is related to hybridity, classify it. Do you see what I mean? So that you can use it in that part. But the good thing is, when you do the literary review at the beginning, at least you know what has been said, and you don't repeat, because sometimes we just repeat what people have already said. Do you see what I mean? But at least if you have a good background, then you can jump high.
That's great.
For Kalidou's work, it would be interesting if you could talk a little bit about My Brother of Jamaica Kincaid, because in that novel she talks a lot about the Caribbean, about the topic in and of itself, like My Brother.
Yes, you're definitely right. You know, when it comes to the Caribbean, and I think Kalidou is going to take note, or maybe Professor J, and I'm sure he's going to tell you about that. You know, the Caribbean is a very complex region. I once read an article that said that even the vegetation is important. So there is nothing that is natural to the Caribbean. Everything comes from elsewhere. Like the population, blacks, Asians, Europeans, they people the Caribbean and they compose that rainbow society that Kalidou is talking about. And sometimes the fruits that we have in the Caribbean, you go to Jamaica, you have mangoes like in Senegal, you have things like that, and you know, it only means that they imported a lot from, because the Harawaks, these are the original peoples of the Caribbean. They were all decimated by, you know, wars and then diseases and all of that. So maybe Kalidou is going to.
Yeah, and even it is interesting that you talk about the mango. Sorry, I've talked to you today. Yeah, because the mango is used even to, it is a metaphor for the hybridity. Because the mango is a tree you can graft. I can have a mango from Senegal, cut one branch and graft a mango from Jamaica. And the opening scene of Mbayang is a market scene where you have the different fruits, the different varieties of mangoes. And those varieties of mangoes illustrate, you see, the different people of the Caribbean. So, but basically what she's doing, she's celebrating that hybridity, which in fact is a problem in Caribbean society because of racial hierarchy. Do you see what I mean? And this is what he needs to show. Do you see what I mean?
Of course.
Okay, thank you very much for your presentation, and I want to encourage you for the achievement of your work, and starting with Désirée. So your work is very promising. I think it is not very easy to deal with these topics, very complex, very original, and I think it is very promising for your work, and I encourage you to achieve, okay, and I'm sure that you can, or you will do it, inshallah. Okay, and I have a question for Awa. talking about African American identity or identity problem. If I'm not mistaken, you said that African American, in order to solve their identity problem, they have to go back to Africa. That's what you said. And okay, you talk about the concept of hybridity with Baba, the concept of double consciousness with young Du Bois. Another concept that is also in betweenness, represented by the two circles here. So we have to consider two parts, or the intersection we have between two circles. So being African and American, or Africans, yes, being African in terms of origins, and Americans also. And this concept of betweenness that is also linked to hybridity. This dilemma of identity, and I have a question about this. Do you think that the fact of going back to Africa is a solution for African Americans to solve their identity problem? Because if you talk about resolution, so you are at the beginning of your work in terms of result. What do you think is a resolution for African Americans to solve their identity problem? Because you can, for instance, have acceptation, meaning accepting their African roots, or rejection. Because we have many cases, take for instance, many African Americans, so when they come back to Africa, so they reject their African roots, so totally break from the African roots. So my question is, do you think that it is a solution for them to solve their identity problem? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor.
This remark underlies another question, because it is related to the title of the proposal itself. Because I talked about religious disobedience. So to avoid the ambiguity, that is the reason why I decided to choose the supernatural. Because when we say religious disobedience, indeed, there may be some misunderstanding as to whether the practices of the Yoruba community in Death and the King's Horseman can be understood as religion or just as syncretism, as you said. But to be honest, the title, I had great difficulty with finding a proper title to my research proposal. I first moved from metaphysics and the two plays, then I shifted to supernatural. But to highlight the psychoanalytical study with which I'm going to proceed with through my research, I thought about shifting the title into just psychology and the supernatural in the two plays. But I will let it under your consideration for me to approve it. But indeed, religious disobedience in itself is a problem. But unfortunately, I did not have time to reconsider it before today, so that's it. Now, for the second question by Dr. Malik, what is this being disobeyed to? So, by disobedience, in Death and the King's Horseman, in my proposal in itself, I said that what is being referred to as disobedience is that in Dr. Faustus is termed as a failure. Now here, in Death and the King's Horseman, instead of talking about Ellison's disobedience, we talk about Ellison's failure in achieving the task of achieving the ritual suicide. But in Dr. Faustus, I think we can indeed talk about disobedience because Faustus goes against the principles of Christianity, because Christianity abhors magical practices, ce qu'on appelle la magie noire en français. That's it, Faustus goes against the principles of Christianity, so he disobeys religions, his religion, despite, in spite of all the warnings he receives from. So that's the reason why I insisted upon the summary of the two plays before starting, because at some point he is introduced to the good and the bad angel, which is said that they accompany human beings. The good angel tells him not to indulge in the practice of magic. And in Islam we have the same thing that appears in the Quran, for example. when we have example of two angels who master magic, who come to a man and tell him, we were sent by God to tempt people through magic, but do not succumb to the temptation. So this is what is intended through disobedience. But again, here the real problem with the term is the title, which needs to be.
Désirée, what about transgression?
Transgression.
Transgression and disobedience. It's me only sin. Transgression, I think it fits the context. Transgression.
Thank you. I will think about it. So for the question of Dr. Diallo about the objective of the work, so it was just kind of my personal psychoanalytic literary interpretation, because I want to insist upon the mechanisms that, or the motivations that push the two protagonists to commit disobedience. And as I said in my outline, they are distracted by lust, their love for women, and also by worldly pleasures, but also by the fear of death, which is dealt with by psychoanalysts. So, on the whole, I think that was also the remarks about my research.
Yeah, thank you so much. Now,
Yes.
Awa.
So the question of Dr. TOURE, do you think that going back to Africa is the solution for the characters to solve their identity problems? So my answer is yes. Because when you read the play from the beginning, there's always, we are introduced to a troubled character who doesn't know who he is. Is he an African or is he an American? So here, and when we read at the end of the play, we see that these characters have found who they are. They have found their identity through going back to the roots. And what we mean by going back to the roots is accepting their cultural heritage. And in the cultural heritage, there is storytelling, because the plays, some plays are presented under the form of storytelling, or others in the plays of Maurice Black Bottom. The characters found themselves through the blues music. They used together and sing together, and this helped them to be in term with themselves, to be in peace also with themselves. So I think it is the answer. My answer is yes. And even if we refer to, for example, Wolof, we said, so it is not for nothing that we said this, because anytime you go back to your roots, you'll find a way to be in tune with yourself. So yeah.
Thank you so much. That was very concise. Now, any last thoughts before I give the floor back to Professor Ying and then to Professor Babacar? Well, overall, it was a very satisfactory day. I mean, it was very natural. It's been a while, but we made it. It was a challenge, but we succeeded. So, Prof, you have the floor now.
So we end as we began. Thank you very much. So I think we all know now the importance of these things. Okay? Is it important? Yes or no? Yes. It's important.
If you say we will meet, we'll meet.
So thank you everyone. Thank you so much for your generosity. Thank you for sharing with us. Thank you dear professors, dear colleagues, for your generosity. Thank you, Bounama, the great moderator with the professor. Thank you to all, and I think we are try to see how maybe in 2 weeks.
I think what we do, we'll try to meet shortly and get this organized so that we can make it happen. Short and precise. You see what I mean?
Thank you.
Thank you for coming out. Thank you.
The royal lady.
You see, I'm even bowing. You see?
Mention spéciale à celle qui va servir le pot là, hein? Un pot riche, non?
Merci.